My face? Oh, sure. Here.
Well, thank you again for coming, and thank you to the Booksmith for hosting this, and thanks to my fellow readers. By pure serendipity and not any prior arrangement, I'll be bringing things full circle from Anthony's Daedalus to Chateau Renaud's Icarus. The story of his in the Exo Orpheus is called An Occasional Icarus, and it's the story of a man who, at 3 specific, somewhat key moments in his life, sort of flies, not even really. I'll be reading part of the second episode from the middle of the story, and at this point the narrator is a French soldier stationed near the German border shortly before World War II, who naturally falls in love with a pretty young nurse. If I could master ventriloquism, I would get a Chateau Renaud, puppet and just kind of, but I thought maybe that would be too much of a statement. I thought about cutting out eye holes too, but then luckily my wife convinced me that would lend an unnecessarily creepy element to the evening. Okay, so waffles sprinkled with powdered sugar that made for fun mustaches, a few glasses of sparkling wine, a coney I'd won by shattering with a single sand-filled ball the flower pot where it was buried up to its neck, a Maxis, a Java, 2 waltzes. Toward evening's end, we were in such a hurry that we left without finishing our glasses of bubbly. A lucky pal had slipped me the address to a tiny little hotel that, as night fell, welcomed all 3 of us, Lorella, the rabbit, and me. All I'd ever known before her was a camp follower. Before me, she'd only had a cousin. In both cases, it had been more a game for naughty children than any sort of carnal embrace. We shared our shared inexperience. My life till then had been mostly a journey without a destination. Lorella's arms gave it one. Late that night, as we were sleeping, I woke to a nibbling sound. I realized the rabbit, emboldened by silence, had started in on my belt, which had slipped from the chair. As gently as I could, I untangled myself from my companion and got out of bed. The rabbit beat a quick retreat before my bearing and determination, offering no resistance. I hung my belt out of reach and turned back toward the bed. I could hear Lorella's breathing in the darkness. A moonbeam slipped between the curtains, limbing her bare shoulders. The thought crossed my mind that come tomorrow we'd have decisions to make. What would we do with the rabbit? What would we do with each other? Whether in my barracks or the inn, the coney would come to a quick end. And as for us, were we to wait till peacetime to marry? I realized I was taking things a little fast. I needed a way to feel Lorella out on the matter without showing my hand. A shiver ran down my spine. Was I really going to sit here naked with her while her warm limbs and velvety skin were waiting for me? I took a step closer to the bed and felt myself unmoored from the ground, rising in the air as once, long ago, on the shore. With this distinction, back then it had been in broad daylight, while the room where I now floated was bathed in shadow. My feet had barely left the ground, but there was no doubt about it. It was starting again. I was flying. I recalled the ease with which, a child of 9, I'd gotten air, if not exactly altitude. I urged myself to meet out my movements precisely at the risk of bouncing like a buoy and clobbering myself on the ceiling. Already my cranium was grazing an acorn on the molding. The room's tininess reined in my exhilaration at the power that had been returned to me. True, I was freed from gravity once more, but inside a parallel pipette of approximately 45 cubic yards. Still a prisoner of ceiling, floor, and walls. My heart pounding like before, and just as torn between fear and exaltation, I managed to stretch out and stabilize myself in this position over the bed, perpendicular to a sleeping Lorella. I could hear her more than see her, make her out from the sound of her breathing. I was tempted to call out, ask her to turn on the bedside lamp, but I was afraid of scaring her. Wouldn't the shock she'd surely feel be likely to change our relationship? It's one thing to entrust yourself to a simple, honest young man, and another to realize you're really dating a freak or even a monster. Would you marry Icarus? I hadn't known Lorella long enough to have a good idea of what she was looking for in the love of her life, a role for which I was now a contender. Maybe she wanted someone with both feet on the ground. Imagine her disappointment then if I woke her, if her eyes opened on my current position, I opted to stay quiet for the moment. And bit by bit, as my eyes grew used to the dark, I could make out the shape of Lorella draped in sheets and a light blanket that both blurred and traced her figure. The sense that wafted from her sleeping body rose my way. I was in a good place up there, overlooking my love. Had it been up to me, I'd have stayed there a moment longer, but I soon felt that familiar density investing my flesh once more. It no longer seemed as horrible now that I'd felt, by the grace of Lorella, the weight of her breast against me. Smoothly in stages I descended toward the bed and found myself curled up against her, just as her thigh and hand moved to find me. The miracle no more repeated itself the next day than it had the first time around. The only 2 other nights Lorella and I spent together, try as I did to beg fate by rising and even hopping half-heartedly at the foot of the bed, I remained a prisoner of earthly pull. I wasn't surprised and quickly returned to bed with my fiancée. Oh, I forgot to mention, the morning after our first night together, we definitely made some big decisions. For one, we'd released the rabbit in a public park, and for another, we'd vowed to get married as soon as we could without waiting for victory. We weren't wrong to want to, especially since victory, as things proved, wasn't exactly around the corner. Alas, our marriage was never to be. While we were waiting for regulation authorization to get married from our respective commanding officers, the enemy launched an offensive and skirted the Maginot Line. The reserves rushed toward the border in a heroic mess. I was among them, Lorella too. My section got surrounded by tanks, its medical unit obliterated by shelling. A letter informing me of Lorella's death reached me months later in the stalag where I stewed away the next 4 years. Not for a single moment in those 4 long years did I rise even so much as an inch above my mattress of straw. It wasn't for lack of dreaming. I pictured myself floating over the snorers in the reeking air of my hut. In a few strokes, I'd reached the door and opened it without a sound. I rose rapidly, straight up through the icy air of Pomerania. Beneath my feet, the lighted stalag grew smaller with each passing second. With its lines of huts, its grid of pathways, its barbed wire fences, and its watchtowers, it started to look like a model before shrinking to a tiny point of light that then vanished in the deep European night. Then, with the instinct of a migratory bird, I'd turn west and head home in a flurry of wings. I returned to France on a train in spring 1945. Lorella was dead. Thank you.